Hello, mech fans. This is Duncan Fisher. Hold on firmly to your mana potions, fireballs, and familiars, because you are tuning in to your regularly scheduled episode of the First Circuit Podcast.
And with tonight, we have the host of Blaine Lee Pardoe.
Hi.
Biter.
All the rest are guests.
Ian.
I'm going as dark as certain ages.
And myself, Old Bob. I need a saying to go say. I would like to introduce our guest host, Blaine Lee Pardoe, a New York Times bestselling author who is a legend in the BattleTech community. Some of Pardoe's notable works include the writing for the lore of BattleTech such as Highlander Gambit, Exodus Road, Measure of a Hero, and Betrayal of Ideas. Also some of the source books for the tabletop version of BattleTech such as Technical Readout 3025, Rhonda's Irregulars, Comstar's Sourcebook, and Wolf Clan Sourcebook, among numerous other books in the following areas of true crime, science fiction, paranormal, and many other game systems such as Robotech and Twilight 2000. Thank you, Blaine, for being a host on the First Circuit Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
All right then. So we've obviously prepared some questions for our guest today, and past those questions, we're going to talk about some Mechwarrior Online stuff as we usually do. To start things off, Blaine, do you have something to introduce yourself with? Like, just take a couple sentences and tell the audience who you are.
Well, I'm one of the original BattleTech authors. I got started with the 3025 source book, first edition. It's been a blast ever since. I think the thing that most people forget is they think if you're a writer of BattleTech, you're not a fan of BattleTech. And I'm just as big a geeky fan of BattleTech as everybody else. I just happen to be someone who gets paid to put words on paper to do it. So
Your fan fiction becomes lore.
Yeah.
yeah, my April Fool's posts on my blog are kind of legendary at this point.
And which ones are those?
Yeah.
I've done a couple of spoofs of real life products that we rejected for BattleTech, and I've done some fictional posts that are pretty funny, factoring in actual weapons ranges and real weapons into BattleTech.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, totally revolutionary concept.
Yeah, speaking of April Fools, how can people read your blog?
How can they get my book? The easiest place, obviously, is Amazon.com. We've now gotten, and there's a long story behind this, but we've gotten most of the original fiction available in ebook at this point in time. And the new books are coming out in multiple formats, digital and hard copy and audio in some cases. So I haven't listened to any of the audiobooks yet. I don't know if I want to listen to somebody reading me my own stuff yet, but the new stuff's coming out in a lot of different formats. We recognize a lot of the old standard players in BattleTech like having a paper book in their hands. You know, realistically, about 2/3 of the stuff though that sells is digital at this point, and so there's usually a push to get the digital stuff out quicker than the paper.
Yeah, actually, like, I'm a big fan of the paperback. Basically, I like to have a physical copy, like, with me, because digitally though, it's really hard to read sometimes on tablets and stuff like that. Plus, I just like to turn the pages. I guess I'm old school that way.
I don't dislike paperback. Everybody thinks because I push ebook, I just recognize that's where things are selling right now, and that's the market. So you play to the market.
And beside novels, you also mentioned your blog. What's the web address of your blog for people to read it?
Oh, sure. A Trivial Pursuit question about my blog. It is blainepardoe.wordpress.com.
All right, thank you. And with that, let's go into some of the BattleTech related questions we've got here. So we've already mentioned roughly what you did. Is there anything else you did that you want to mention at this point? When it comes to BattleTech?
I think I've done around 11 or 12 of the novels. Done a lot of military history stuff, but in BattleTech, I've done a lot of the original source books. I mean, the original Fourth Succession War atlases, which were great.
Awesome.
I contributed to a lot of the material we've done over the years. Sometimes you're only contributing a little bit, sometimes a lot. So, It's been a great ride so far, and I'm pleased to say too, at an upcoming source book we have coming out, I actually went back and have started writing source book material again for the first time in like 2 decades. So that's going to be fun when that comes out. So
Yeah, I have to say the Atlas was great because I remember actually purchasing that and just reading it of all the different units, what they did and who they fought and where they fought and everything. I thought that was amazing, just amazing book to read. And a lot of people don't like that kind of stuff, but I love all the technical stuff that you put into it.
yeah, I was one of the writers for that, and I loved it. It was a great book, and that's one I always wished they did come back out and put out available again, in hard copy, because people want that book. There's two of them, there's two
Yeah,
editions of it, and people love those things. I mean, it's amazing.
yeah, I got both those books in my category like behind me, and I love them.
Right, then follow up to this. Of all the works you've done so far, what's your favorite work?
Ooh, that's hard.
Hmm.
Favorite in what way? Let's see. I would say probably Betrayal of Ideals is right up there with the new one that I just did, which was Forever Faithful. Of coming out later this year, I think is that I wrote is probably going to top both of those.
Right.
Of absolute fun and fanboy moments, as well as moments for the Grenards who've been with BattleTech forever. I mean, we're going to see some things that tying up a storyline that began in 1989, and it's just the scale and scope of it is beyond epic, and I think there's something in there for everyone, and we introduce a lot of new characters, and I say I really had fun with the one that's coming out. But I would have to say Betrayal of Ideals, writing about Clan Wolverine and what really happened with the Wolverines, it was a lot of fun. It twerked a lot of people in the BattleTech community. Um, I always like it when fans get into argument about canon with the guy who wrote the canon. Uh, but I loved it because it evoked such an emotional response. And we've had something similar with Forever Faithful, where we went back to the whole Twilight of the Clans and kind of carried that forward into the Dark Ages.
uh, quick huff there when you mentioned those ages. How did you get into writing for BattleTech? What's your story there?
That's a good question. I reached out to FASA. I was in college at the time, just finishing up. They had the Star Trek role-playing game, and I wrote on a typewriter because we didn't have computers then.
Yeah.
I put together the scenario pack that became the Strider incident for the Star Trek role-playing game. I sent it in to FASA and was kind of hopeful that they would purchase it, and they said, "We love it. We're going to buy it." I was like, "Great!" Sold my first book while I was in college. And they said, "We got this other game, though. We want you to take a look at it. We've got a tech readout coming out. First one, and we're looking for some authors." So they sent me a copy of Battle Droids, and then followed it like 2 weeks later with a copy of BattleTech. And I went through and read it, and I was like, "Hey, this is kind of cool." And it had kind of a great vibe to it. It was what I liked was the opportunity to create some stories about not only the mech warriors, but it seemed to me like the thing that resonated to me was there's the characters that you traditionally associate with a book or any sort of source material, but there was also the mechs themselves, and the mechs in BattleTech are actual characters themselves.
Hmm.
I mean, people go out and model them. If you think about it, they read a book, they go out and buy the miniature, and they paint it up according to the unit schemes and stuff. And that to me was a lot of fun, and the opportunity to do it. It amazes me to this day how many people go, "Oh man, this character in 3025 on page 48. I really like this character," and I'm like, "Wow, that was it's 3 decades ago." And it still kind of resonates with people. So it was a lot of fun. They brought in, I think, 5 or 6 of us to do that book, and they gave us the riflemen and a couple others and said, write up drafts of how you would do it. And they gave us a very simple template to follow. And then based on that, they gave us a stack of photocopied mechs, the original draft artwork, and we're like, here, have at it. And we had a blank slate to work with at that point, so it was a lot of fun.
The personalities basically are you talking about the pilots that actually piloted the mechs themselves that you guys wrote?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. The they always had like who are the key mech warriors who piloted those mechs, and what people didn't realize is we used that as a way to introduce new mercenary units, new command structures, paint schemes. I mean, we had so much fun with it back then. And you didn't have the burden with those first few books of all of the canon material that's out there. I kind of feel sorry for the guys that have to write some of the stuff that we're going to be covering now because there's such a wealth of material out there. I think it's very hard for an author to come in off the street and write BattleTech. I mean, unless you've been immersed in it a long time, I don't know how anybody could just come in and go, okay, well, I want to write a book. And I think we saw some of that with the early Dark Ages stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They brought in authors who didn't know anything about BattleTech who tried to write about it. And you had mechs doing cartwheels and crazy stuff that it's like, okay, you don't get how the mechanics of the universe actually work here. And it was good near the end of the Dark Ages stuff. They started bringing us back in, but by then I think the fan base had been a little sour to it.
Yeah, the
Just
lore.
a tiny bit.
Sorry, the lore itself is so vast and immense. It's not just the battle mechs. It's actually the characters, the planets, the politics, the planetary royal families, and everything else. There's a huge, immense lore to BattleTech, and it's hard to get into it. And most people just look at the mechs, but there's so much behind the scenes going on.
Yeah, with the new novel that I finished in December and they're reviewing right now, I was hoping it'd be out for Gen Con. I'm not sure if that's going to be the case or not. But one of the key tenets I kind of mentally told myself is I'm not going to make people go back and reread all the Dark Ages stuff. I'm going to write a book that anybody can pick up that's going to get them started.
Yeah.
So that you can jump in at this point. Because it's too immense. The last thing you want to do is go, okay, in order for you to understand all the events in this book, you need to read the following 12 out of print paperback books. Yeah, it's just, you can't do that to people. It's wrong. It's just wrong.
Next question: how do you approach a new piece you have to write?
Okay, over the years, a lot of my earlier stuff was more driven off the story I wanted to tell, and then I crafted characters that I thought were interesting to tell that. In the last few years, what I've been focusing on more is telling good character stories, and the plots kind of follow. I like that aspect of it a great deal. So I start with what's the overall story I want to accomplish, and I usually get a couple of scenes in mind. There's a couple of ooh, that would be really cool to see. And once I get the scene, I can go, so how do I arrive that gets me excited in a scene? How do I create the circumstances to create that scene? Once I do that, then it makes a better story because you're telling a story about the characters in that moment. And there were just some things that there's things I wanted to show from different aspects. When you work on a book, sometimes the story drives it. I would say Forever Faithful was one where end was, which was the Fidelis, because I wrote about that in Surrender Your Dreams. But there was this huge gap between the end of Exodus Road and that period in the Dark Ages. How do you tell that story across all those decades so that it and gets them excited? And when you get down to it, it's all about the characters, and the characters have to carry that all the way through. So I was fortunate because I had some great characters to work with, and I didn't make them cardboardy. They weren't two-dimensional. They were kind of drawn all the way through. So I'm very character focused at this point. I look for good stories to tell as a reader, I want to write things that I would like to read in BattleTech. And there's a couple of chapters in the new book I go back to all the time, even though the darn thing hasn't been printed yet. I still go back and read them and chuckle because it's like, I really like this scene. It's goofy, and I'm sure some fans will resonate with, but for me, it's like, this is my favorite little scene here.
It's a bit like you could give a dry reading of the whole, Fall of the Star League, or you could talk about when Kerensky kicked down the door in his Orion.
Right. Yeah, the firing squad is always the scene I've wanted to see there. That to me was beautiful, and I actually get to come back to that a little bit in the upcoming project. So there's some definite fun moments, and there's things you do that are going to resonate with fans. Certain one-liners that get thrown out. I'll never forget when I read Stackpole's Warrior Trilogy, that the great scene was when Max Lau realizes that the plates are all worlds of the compelling confederation, at the wedding scene. You can't top that, and Mike did.
No.
He turned around. I love it when they did the entire, invasion of the clans, and Romano Lau's like, oh, Wolves Dragoons are going to come out now and they're going to beat the crap out of these clans. And it's like, you don't get it. We're not Wolves Dragoons. We are the Wolf Dragoons. There's that moment. You have to have those moments in BattleTech that click and are going to stick with people throughout. And I was fortunate with this new book. There's going to be a lot of that. So I think there's just going to be moments that people are going to go, holy crap, did he just say what I think he said? And that's great. I want people to have their jaws hanging open and be forced to go to the next chapter because they can't put it down. Probably putting you guys to sleep. Sorry.
No, actually, this is fascinating.
This is fascinating. At this point, I'm kind of just, I want to get the new book already. Can you send me a draft? Right. One follow-up that Bob was curious about. If you write something like the source book for Comstar, what kind of research do you put into this?
It was actually one of the easier books to write because we had very little lore on Comstar other than Jerome Blake sees Terra. We never explained any of it. To head to Waterley being a crazy rushing in, against the clans on Tukied, and so there's this huge gap of stuff there. And when you look at the actual source material in 1992, which was when the book was done, there wasn't a lot out there. There was very little that I had to do, but nobody wanted to tackle the book. And I reached out to Mike Neistel at the time and said, still doing the source books like we did with Clan Wolf and like we used to do in the old original house books, those big robust books. And I said, the only thing we've never covered is Comstar. And he's like, if you want to tackle it, you can.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. And when I started going through all the canon material, there just wasn't a lot there. So I was able to fill in a lot of the history of Comstar right up to the Battle of Tukied. Now, Tukied, there's a lot of source material that I had to go to pull that together. But it was actually one of the easier books to write because you're working with a blank canvas. Know how anybody could write a source book like that now because you'd have so much material you'd have to latch onto and sync up. Our fact checkers absolute ulcers sometimes, but and sometimes I will admit I do it deliberately. But it's just part of being in BattleTech,
Beyond the source material from BattleTech, did you do any kind of real-life research?
Life research. I'm stuck on that one, so I don't know how to answer that. Not really.
Well, for example, Jordan always mentions how his initial ideas for BattleTech were kind of like the Roman Empire. Did you have something like this to go off?
I really didn't. BattleTech the key tenets of BattleTech have always been that there are different house governments. They're not necessarily good versus evil. And when you look at the old FASA system that they had for Renegade Legions, It was, you had the rebels fighting Tog, and Tog was the oppressive evil empire. It was, their take on Star Wars. And I always felt that was a little too cardboardy. What I like about BattleTech is, if you're a Houstavian Federated Sons fan, you go, oh, they're the greatest. Everybody else is bad.
Well, obviously.
But if you're a House Lao fan, you go, I don't know, you drink a lot, and but you also are you think your house is the best and is rightful and just in what they do. So to me, I think one of the things that makes BattleTech kind of prevail is there is no good versus bad. The only time we ever had that was the Jihad, when you had the word of Blake, and I don't think that played out well for a lot of fans. To have just a truly psychotic enemy. If you think about how that played out, let's say versus the Forced Secession War or the Klan invasion, it doesn't flow the same way. It doesn't have the same vibe to it.
Yeah, very much so. At least the vibe I often get, at least very surface level, is that it's kind of like medieval era with the battle mechs sort of being, they often talk about the pilots being like knights in a way, and you would have sort of, the English kings versus the French kings versus the, whoever Germanic kings and whatnot. And there is no true good guy in that scenario.
But there's an obvious bad one, either. The English king.
No, I would have said the French. They should have just given us their lands.
That's the British for you.
Just on Ian bringing up broader things like outside reading, what do you think of, like, for example, the great man theory for history, and does that factor into greatly your work on BattleTech?
To a certain degree, especially recently, I have kind of had to embrace a little bit of that, because the project I've been working on isn't just kind of bringing an end to the Dark Ages. It's kind of launching the next era of BattleTech. So there's a lot of scrutiny this thing's going under right now, and you really have to look at the characters and where they're going to go with this. And their characters, I find, are the most flawed characters. They have deep-seated issues. There was one, we were talking about one character, and another writer who I respect a great deal goes, the guy's a homicidal maniac. And I'm like, is he really? That's one perspective of him. But not, maybe if we peel that back a little bit, we see a little bit more of this character, and there's some justifications for it. I've done a lot of writing lately with Malvina Hazen of the Jade Falcons, and a lot of folks I've seen online post things like, oh, she's a psychopathic, sociopathic maniac, she's a serial killer with a battle mech type thing. And I'm like, yeah, but we never really get into the exploration of how she ends up how she is. And is she a product of Clan Jade Falcon? Is she a product of her genetics? Is she a product of what? And what does that actually mean? And why is she the way she is? And I think that's a fun thing to explore. And it makes the characters a heck of a lot more interesting. But yeah, we're definitely seeing a lot more influence of the great man. Because we're ushering in a whole new age here. So
I got a question. Since you did work on the Wolf Dragoon book, or the Wolf Clan, basically source book, I'm curious. Did you have any influence on the Wolf Dragoons and Natasha Kerensky?
No,
No?
not on that. With the Wolf Clan source book, some of the original material had been drafted. Some of it was very sketch. I think the entire Wolves Dragoons thing was came from Jordan and Sam Lewis and Mike Stackpole. The link there, I was as surprised as everybody else when we hit that. There's certain things like that we did. I early pieces of Clan Wolf stuff. So we talked where you see the actual rise of the clans was the stuff I wrote in that source book. Nicholas Kerensky having a brain disease, and I mean, who cooks up? We're going to reshape our society around random animals in my front yard.
That's one way to put it.
Yeah, it is.
So like all I got was, well, you got to explain Nicholas Karinsky doing this, and I was like, the only thing I come up with is a brain aneurysm at this point. But so I did a lot of that early stuff, and even then, I identified the Clan Wolverine, which I named after University of Michigan Wolverines because I was from Michigan at the time. So, there's things like that get incorporated in. But no, I didn't do that. I have written, and hopefully it'll come out in the next month or so, month or two. I have written a novella for Wolves Dragoons, which is set in the new era type stuff. So, or moving towards that. So, I have had to actually go back and re-immerse myself in everything Wolves Dragoons. And it's been a blast. It's been a blast, and I'm going. I'm not gonna ruin Wolves Dragoons, so nobody get paranoid about it. But we're gonna see a little subplot storyline. I call it the enchanting prelude to the big event. So it's that kind of thing that'll set the stage for some of the stuff that's coming up. So there's gonna be a lot of fun with it. It's a neat unit to play with, but what's happened, I heard a lot of people call the Dragoons Mary Sue's, like, oh, they got plot armor, they get wiped out, but somehow they come back. And, we forget that they're actually mercenaries and real problems and issues and things that you wouldn't expect. And I'm hoping to really kind of poke a little bit at some unique characters within the Dragoons and some events that are going to be really interesting.
Can't wait for that. Actually, I just have two more questions, and basically one is about Clan Wolverine, another one is about the clans. But okay, Clan Wolverine. I know we talked about this before the podcast. With the Jihad conspiracies, they had a map, and basically going down past Lao into the deep periphery. What happened, or what really happened to Clan Wolverine?
I'm sorry that information has been classified. Look, first of all, you're reading a book of conspiracy theories.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
I know.
I feel like a guy in Ancient Aliens at this point. I've got my hands up in the air, and it's like it's aliens. Pretty much the definitive approach to the Wolverines, and the only stuff I can truly say is 100% canon is the stuff we put in print, in the novel Betrayal. Now I rewrote the end of Betrayal of Ideals when it went to press. Originally, it appeared in BattleCorps, and when it came out as a book, I said I want to add some stuff at the beginning and I want to add some stuff at the end. And John was like, "You can do whatever you want. That's great." And so I would say the last definitive glimpse you have is at the last end of Betrayal of Ideals, where you have, essentially the Word of Blake / Comstar kind of finding out that there is a presence out there and that the Wolverines do still exist because they've gone through and erected a little bit of a monument there on Barbados, and that's kind of creepy and scary and everything else. Now, I do have some story ideas that I have floated to Brent Evans on some things I want to do with the Wolverines and where I think they may fit in or may not fit in. Have actually in the new book included a single line about Clan Wolverine that will make everyone wet themselves just a little bit. If it survives the editor, and John is like, I think my editor John Elfers he's one of those guys I deliberately give ulcers to. I think he's like, I don't know if we should say that, and I'm like, yeah, we should. Brent liked the line in the book, so I'm hoping it'll pass. But I have some ideas. They're just not ready to be canonized yet. And may not for years. I mean, there's some stuff we have to map out. We have sessions usually at Gen Con authors together with the editors and the BattleTech line developers to kind of map out what are the next books that are coming, what are the source books we want to be producing, what is the fiction that's going to tie into that. And we've already been doing a lot of that. I've actually got an approved novel outline in the new era, so that'll be this fall, and I've sketched out a novel idea for another author who's done a lot of source book material. I really like his stuff. They're kind of him, but he's never done a novel thing. I said, well, I'll sketch out the scope of the storyline. He can go at it from there. So I've sketched that out. I've actually put together a couple other ideas too. So there's some really cool stuff proved and going to get written later this year. So BattleTech fiction's back.
I hope so, man. I love the whole story about Clan Wolverine, actually. Second part is about the clans. It's a two-part question. Why were they created, and why was the SLDF used for them?
I wasn't privy to some of those discussions that took place, but I can tell you this. In a lot of the meetings we have, these BattleTech summits that we have had over the years, when we talked about the clans, etc., a lot of it has come from, we don't have aliens in the BattleTech universe. We just don't. So you have to take mankind and make mankind as alien as you can. And you couldn't have the SLDF just emerge as the SLDF. Think that they wouldn't have undergone some sort of transformation would just been wrong. And I think I like what they've done with the clans in some respects. I don't think Mechwarrior Online balances in clans and clan tech right. I mean, you need a good bidding process. Just throwing clan mechs in against inner sphere mechs isn't a good balance. And you have to look at the full breadth of clan society and the bidding process and Zelbringen and all this other stuff that really kind of comes in to play. But we had to have an invader that was so incredibly different and almost alien, and the clans really were. I mean, they showed up and they were the closest thing we've had to aliens. No, I'm not counting Far Country because giant sentient chickens just doesn't work for me.
That number just doesn't exist. We don't talk about it.
So, well, yeah, that's the unspoken book for me. But
the dark age of books.
Yes.
You know what? We were doing a lot of good book, and there's parts of that I really like. It's the only book where I think you get a land air mech in there and doing anything. So, in some respects, I really like the book. The sentient chicken thing is hard for me to.
I have one last
Sure.
question. I have one last question about Twilight 2000. Actually, I know you wrote Satellite Down, and what was your inspiration for that? Because actually, like I played the game since high school, and I loved it. I loved everything about Twilight 2000, and played everything about it. Went to Europe, went to Afghanistan, came back to U.S. and did a whole different thing. And it was great. It was a great game. We played for umpteen hours, and one of the modules we did do was Satellite Down. I'm curious, what was the inspiration for that one?
Yeah, I don't honestly remember how I ended up on the subject. I'm like everybody else. I like that universe. I thought it was really cool. It's a great RPG. I think we don't have a lot of modern weaponry type RPGs where you can shoot somebody and they just die.
Yeah.
And that added to Twilight 2000. I mean, it really made it challenging to play. To me, it was like, you would have some of this information out there. I wanted to do something with a submarine. I wanted to do something with a satellite, gathering some of that weather information I thought would be really useful.
Yeah.
And so it was one of those things where it was like, oh, this would be fun to play. It's different. It's challenging, and it was out of Europe. And I wanted to get away from the European stuff because the only struggle I ever had with Twilight 2000 is a lot of those places I had to break out a map and look them up.
Yeah.
Europe isn't that big.
Yeah, but like on the map, that was so detailed that it was like, okay, what town am I in again? You know, it was really, really detailed.
Well, we only have like 10 of those.
Oh, okay. Well, every village was on there too, so.
Right. That I can see.
And basically, that's one thing I liked about Twilight 2000 was like the Spanish Main. Basically, you get onto an old clipper ship, basically an old Spanish ship, and go back to U.S. And different things, like aspect and the alternate lore they had for it was actually really good. I loved it.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great universe in many respects, and I'm really surprised it hasn't come back.
Yeah.
With all these Kickstarters and stuff where they've brought back game systems, that's one that really needs to come back because it could use a reskin and some new aspects to it. So
Let's just hope the namesake and the reskin doesn't result in the characters being more sparkly during daytime.
No. Oh God.
Wow.
Oh,
That's a
that was
reference there.
painful. Oh,
Blaine, what are your thoughts on the casting of Batman?
I'm not really. I don't have an opinion on that. I was okay with Ben Affleck for a while. I thought that was okay. I think DC does not know how to handle a shared universe at all. They will never stand up to what Marvel's done. Like Steppenwolf, what were they thinking? I mean, I've been reading comics since I was a little kid, and I had to look up Steppenwolf. I didn't, and I was like, you had this wealth of characters to choose from, and you chose the most obscure one you could. It just I don't know. DC seems to be just floundering with its properties. They've had a couple of good successes. I think Wonder Woman was very
Mhm.
good.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
But almost everything else, I'm kind of hit or miss. Even my grandson didn't enjoy Justice League that much.
Going back to BattleTech, one personal question I've thought about a lot in the past couple of months. I'm currently trying to get back into the whole Dark Age stuff to prepare for what's gonna come beyond, and I'm having a hard time reading some of the novels. So for people like me who just want to get into the new stuff that's gonna come up soon, is there anything you can recommend us to read to be able to kind of skip over some of the stuff we don't like?
Skip over Dark Age.
Yeah, I would say Masters of War is a good book. A Rending of Falcons. Definitely, Target of Opportunity, Surrender Your Dreams, because I wrote them. They actually, as a writer, I like tying in stuff that I've had hands on. Actually, say a great starting point would be to pick up one of the last source books that came out about Shattered Fortress. Whole Fortress Republic, which is another great book in that line to pick up. But you when you start with the whole concept of Fortress Republic and what's happening, I really think what Phil Lee has pulled together with the other authors in Shattered Fortress is really outstanding, and it really gives you here's the historical context of where we are at this point in time. You may be able to skip a lot of the novels and kind of go that route.
All right, that's really good to know. I'm gonna do that. So then I've got one question that's gonna be completely biased by my point of view. Why the
Sure.
F do you like to write about bad guys so much?
Bad guys? What bad guys?
Well, certain green factions.
Wow.
Ooh.
They're
Is
not
this a
bad.
Jade
They're just
Falcon?
misunderstood.
Is this a Jade Falcon shot? Wow.
Sure.
So again, I don't believe that there's good and bad right now. You got to look at the Jade Falcons in the Dark Ages for what they are right now, and don't understand Malvina Hazen, which and I'll talk a little bit about that. Malvina Hazen understands one thing: Jade Falcons will follow strength, follow anybody, no matter how batshit crazy they are, as long as they're providing victories and reaping honor, etc. against her clan probably better than most. And she knows all that matters is the victory. That's as long as I can keep having victory, I can go forward. You also have to look back at the history of Jade Falcons. Always Brett and I had this conversation. Now, use some of the words he uses in this. The Jade Falcons have always kind of been the whetstone for sharpening your blades if you're the clans. You wanted to become better, you sent your troops up against the Jade Falcons, because you're gonna bleed a little bit, but you're gonna get better at what you're doing. They were always very elite. Malvina's kind of, as a force of personality, has carried him out to the extreme. And there's a price to be paid for that at some point. And that will happen, I believe, since I wrote it. But I think what I like is that you have to understand that they're not necessarily bad. They have a leader and the nature of who they are in the clan culture. And she's driving them to victory after victory after victory. I mean, she's been on Tharkat. She's been, she's all over the place. And right now, when you look at Shattered Fortress, it's Clan Jade Falcon and Clan Wolf are at the doorstep. And you're looking at, like I said, it's a 1989 storyline. Actually, you got two clans standing on the doorstep of Terra right now. To me, you could look at them as the bad guys, but I don't think they are. And I will say this: I think some of the things we have planned for Jade Falcon, stunning, shocking, and awesome. I really do believe that it all depends on who's leading. And right now, you've got somebody who's an incredibly iron-willed person. Very distinct perspective of how her people fit and where they fit in the culture. So, are they the bad guys? When you read the Anvil, did you get the impression Stephanie Sistu was a bad guy? The option of 15 tactical nukes on Coventry. Any point she could have won the battle, and she had complete permission, by the way, to use the nukes. Didn't do it. So I don't think the Jade Falcons are necessarily bad, and it's very interesting to kind of poke at that. So I'll challenge you on that one.
Yeah, I mean, it was meant to work. Let me rephrase the question slightly. What I was actually trying to get out of you is, how do you decide what characters and factions to write on, or do you get assigned projects?
Certain projects, by their very nature, you have to include certain characters. Story requires certain key characters to either initiate or start something or wrap something up. The rest of the time, I'll create characters. The character of Stephanie Sistu was quite literally, when Shattered Fortress came out, 2 sentences in the entire source book on her. And I built the whole story based on that. We looked at it and said, this would be fun to do. Let's create that character and make that character kind of a foil to the thinking of the Jade Falcons being dark. So, I kind of have free reign to go down those paths. There's some characters in Wolves Dragoons. There's a couple of key characters that you have to have because you're talking about this elite mercenary unit. But beyond that, I created a whole bunch of new characters, and I wanted to do that so that the players and the readers would have something new to latch onto, new mechs, new paint schemes, new I wanted them to go, oh, this is kind of a throwback to the old age. I mean, when I was doing the new Wolves Dragoons book, this is going to sound crazy to you guys. I dug out my original copy of Tales of the Black Widow Company.
Oh yeah, best book. Really good.
And it was dusty, but and I'm flipping through it going, so what's the magic that we had back then? Because we didn't have the full scope of Wolves Dragoons. We had one company that we were dealing with. That set the stage for all of us to be introduced to Wolves Dragoons. And I said, what if we could get back to that? Not tell a huge story. Well, in some respects, this is huge, but story of 12 people that are, fighting a desperate battle and make them really interesting characters. And I'll say between that and watching The Dirty Dozen on TV, I was like, I know what I'm doing here. I know exactly what to do here. And anybody that goes, you stole the idea from The Dirty Dozen. Yep.
I kind of feel like we're talking about references that are older than me.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, they're dark, but sometimes you have to have. Yeah. I think what's interesting with a good character is the struggle they have internally with some of the problems. It's easy for Stephanie Sistu to just blow things up using nuclear weapons, and Coventry would have fallen, etc. And we also talked about, this was kind of a crucial battle in the Anvil because I had to kill who a lot of fans in the Dark Ages liked, and
Say again, which character did you have to kill?
I had to kill Kelso Steiner, General Steiner, and
Yeah.
who led the Stormhammers, and we talked about, the death scene isn't as important as what follows. Great line in that novella, if you haven't read it yet, that I enjoy, which is, it really takes Shakespeare to appreciate the clans, and a certain element of that to the clans that you almost have to view them through a Shakespearean perspective. So there's a lot of fun with it. Dark characters, yeah, kind of. Sometimes I got a lot of flack that the Wolverines were bad guys, from the people who swore Nicholas was sane.
I love the Wolverines, so it's all good. I love them.
Say, I do too. They're fun.
Yeah.
They're fun, and man, are they pissed off.
One of the things I just want to say thank you for actually creating the Wolverines, because one of the things I actually did, what really inspired me to look through all the books, was what references they had in all the different books. Like they found, like Comstar found a bunch of, like a dead Mechwarrior with a 331 patch, like in some planet. So it's like, oh, cool. We're, like, where am I gonna find this next reference for something that they came and did. So I read book, page, from front end to back end of trying to find any references to Clan Wolverine until until you wrote the books. It's like, oh man, I gotta go find out what happened here, what happened here, and where, what they did and all that kind of stuff. And I have to thank you for that, because that really got me to reading. I mean, the Starlight, the Starlight book, the Comstar book, just everything I could, all the information I could, trying to find anything about Clan Wolverine. And thank you.
Oh sure, it's a great faction because we've all at one point or another felt like we were being persecuted, or in regular day life where it's like, but I didn't do all these terrible things that you're accusing me of. Yeah, but we're accusing you of them anyway.
Yeah.
And it was great. I love the fact that a lot of Clan fans were like, oh no, this isn't what went down. They were horrible people. That's the victor telling the story, and you got to be suspicious of what the victor writes.
Talked a fair bit about how you influence the direction of the BattleTech universe. Do you actually have something like a description of your position, like how you take part in shaping the universe?
No, I'm a mercenary. I work for pay. I get invited to meetings and I offer my opinions. Sometimes those opinions are taken, and sometimes those opinions aren't. I'm asked to write some of the fiction based on some of the opinions I offer. So it's not an official position. I'm a freelancer as far as as far as Catalyst is concerned. But it's nice being pulled into the discussions, and I will tell you, I wish the fans could see some of the discussions we've had over the years. They're hilarious and dark and twisted, and yeah, they're very interesting discussions, and how we arrive at some of the decisions is downright goofy at times, but it's fun because we're all fans of BattleTech too, so we sit around and kind of poke fun at each other, and definitely poke fun at our editor. Poor John. He just, we had so much fun, but we go back and forth. It's a lot of it makes for a more interesting universe that way, I think.
What would you say is the, like, with Warhammer 40,000, at least speaking from something I know, like a tagline you could go with that is something along the lines of, in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, there is only war. And therefore all the storytelling fits into the general box of grim dark. And that's how, that's the appeal of the setting. What is the appeal? What would you say is the tagline for BattleTech?
We were doing Game of Thrones before Game of Thrones was. We've been playing the whole shuffling and everyone wanting to gain Terra and reunite the Star League and return man to a golden age. We've been doing that for ages. There's almost something Arthurian about the entire thing. It's trying to restore Camelot. And I'm not so sure that things were so great under the quote golden age of the Star League, etc. But to me, that's what was exciting about it. Was we've been playing the Game of Thrones, and then it's generational, and we've never had anybody. We got close. I mean, we had the Federated Commonwealth. It was really close.
Yeah, because you did mention the Shattered Fortress. That's the only book I honestly have read since I got into the game through Harebrained Schemes and Mechwarrior Online. And in that, they are with the Fortress Republic falling down. They're all racing to Terra, and that's quite it does all build around that. The only thing I would say about that book, just as somebody who's only got into the lore from this, is it kind of ends on a cliffhanger, and the whole thing is based on. The Fortress Republic has some special technology. It has the wall around it, and then the wall, they turn it off for some reason, and they never answer why it's turned off.
Yeah, we get into it a little bit in the stuff that's coming, obviously, and it ended on a cliffhanger because we knew exactly what was coming next, which is what I've been working on.
Oh yeah, it's just it's like writing a book of the invasion of the clans and ending on like the Battle of Tukiad. But you don't have the battle happen. It's just and then they get a letter from Comstar, and that's where you end off, and you're like, great, I have to wait until the next book is out.
Oh, there's been a lot of we really had to sort through some stuff, and I can't go into some of the details of some of the stuff going in the background. There were some storylines that were floated, 5-6 years ago around where this should go and how it should unfold. And a number of us didn't like those ideas, so we had to recraft new ones. And we started that, I want to say 2 years ago, 2017 probably, was when we had a summit to go, okay, let's pretend in slate, how do we straighten this out? And there were some ideas that I threw out, Phil Lee threw out, Brett threw out, John threw out, and Schmeisers threw out, and we really said, where do we need to drive this to, and where is it that it needs to go, not just from a product perspective, but from a fan base perspective. And so there's some things that came out of those meetings that were just absolutely phenomenal. To go, let's produce a giant book that covers the next set. That book is in production right now in terms of writing. But it's got to go through a lot of scrutiny, just like my novels are going through right now. Not talking about just bringing it into the Dark Ages. We're talking about ushering in the new era. And so to do that, we've got to make sure that it's positioned properly. I'm anticipating I got to do a lot of rewriting just because I know some of the guys are going to come back with some suggestions, and it's all part of it. Yeah, but I think in the end, for the fans, the wait is going to be worth it. You're on a cliffhanger, but you were that way when we watched, the Avengers with the Infinity Stones. We were on a cliffhanger, and it took months and months and months, and then when you got to the end, it's that big. And honestly, I think that's causing some of the problems. Is Avengers Endgame really set the bar. The Thrones finale, and we're like, yeah. and so it's like it's put a whole new level. It really that actually came up in discussion. It's like, we better put this under another level of scrutiny one more time just to make sure, because we don't want to out that Thrones did. We want to hit at the level of Endgame, and are. And I feel for Mike Stackpole all these years. He went through and did this and did it, weathered it. Now I'm doing it, and I'm like, oh my God, this is a pain. The pressures are there, believe me.
Well, yeah, one of the pressures is you have a fan base that's been with the lore for past 30 years that are passionate about the game itself. Like I know I am. I'm very passionate. I love history. I love reading anything about history. And one of the things I love about BattleTech is just the history itself. And so you have a huge base of people that like, oh well, what about this? What about this? And I know you get a kick out of like us talking about that, and that's cool, and I love that. But a very passionate group of people that love the BattleTech universe of what you and everyone else created, and that's one of the things that I think. Looking into it when you're building these things, I assume basically like you kind of get into that. It's like, oh, got to make sure this is right, this is right, this is right.
Oh, absolutely. And like I said, the fact checkers, we get caught in these things about, and frankly, I like I said, I like giving them ulcers sometimes. There's no rule in the game for this. Well, that doesn't mean it can't be done.
Yeah.
Certain things that we've done that have never showed up as a rule in the game. That's okay. That doesn't mean that it can't be done. It just means it's not there. But you have to do it right. I think we all remember when, Joanna killed Natasha Karinsky with her jump jets to the cockpit. And you sit there and go, yeah, there's no rule for that. And there's probably a reason there shouldn't have been a rule for that. You don't want to have stuff because it's going to make it rough on the fans are going to react to it. So you have to, if it's not covered in the quote unquote rules of BattleTech, well, it shouldn't be a limiting factor for the writer, but you got to make sure you're doing it right. That's not how a character like that. I struggled with that death a little bit. Just felt like that's not how it should have gone down. But
should have
that
used
was
the wrestling move.
Yeah, I didn't want
grappling.
that. Didn't want that. I wanted something else. So I don't know what that is, but I would have gone a different direction. But I respect the author. He's done what he's had to do there.
So I was just going to talk about, we're talking about the future of BattleTech and whatnot, and making sure it doesn't have a Game of Thrones finale kind of thing. It's like, from what little I can tell, is obviously, you're setting up lots of eras, Star League, Succession Wars, Clan Invasion, Civil War, Jihad, Dark Age, and the next era that's coming up. But my little concern, at least obviously little person from the sidelines, is just like, you're building like a Jenga tower and you're putting a block every time and you're changing the status quo. But obviously the point of a franchise is to keep going. There's not actually going to be a cornerstone on the top.
Well, in order for BattleTech to do well, we have to be able to bring in new players. And this is one of the problems I've had with the Jihad era. We wallowed in the Jihad era for so long. It was impossible for anybody to jump in. There was no supporting fiction for it. There was no cohesive place you could go to say, here's what the timeline was. And as we've talked about even in this call, there were a lot of rumors, innuendos, conspiracies. And nobody knew what was right and what wasn't. And it made it impossible to bring in new players. We have to bring in new players to BattleTech. And I think Mechwarrior Online does a good job with that. I also think if we kind of clear the slate, we don't have to have them jump into the Dark Ages, which is a murky ground for a lot of the fan base, even the existing fan base. So moving to a new era will actually open it up so that somebody can walk in off the street and jump in and know where they're at. And I think we've got to do that. I think it's got to happen. Crucial. And that's why you're seeing some of the stuff out there like the young adult novels now that have come out. And I haven't read any of them yet, but to me, that's a very smart move. You want to bring people into BattleTech, and it's always a balancing act between juggling that and the guys who have been reading it for 30 years. how do you balance all that stuff out? You've got to find a way to do it, and that's why these books undergo the level of rigor that they undergo before you guys even see them, because we recognize we're kind of been laying the stage for the last 2 or 3 years to get to the next thing, and we've got to make sure that that entry point is perfect and is just resonates with existing fans and the new fans.
You've talked a lot about people you are working with. Do you have a favorite author besides yourself?
Oh, that's a good question. I've always liked Bill Keith's stuff, and Bill Keith and I did some stuff early on together when we were planning out the whole Twilight of the Clan stuff. There was some stuff I did with Bill Keith that was fun, and I like Bill's style. I think Bill has a good flow for especially the early age of BattleTech. His stuff was really good, and I really enjoy it. He's very good with the characters. I've started getting into Mike Stackpole's the 3 novellas now of the early age of the Kellhounds, and those are really I've enjoyed some of that too. I like Mike's stuff obviously because it's so foundational to a lot of BattleTech.
Yeah, like Decision of Thunder Rift was really good. I love that book.
Yeah, if you knew nothing about BattleTech, I taught you everything about BattleTech.
Yeah.
That's quite literally what happened to me.
I got a question. For Comstar and Word of Blake, did you foresee the Word of Blake when you started writing Comstar?
We really only agreed that the schism had taken place. There had been talk of the jihad. There were, it was more like a rumor amongst the writers that, yeah, there's going to be something that comes down where the Word of Blake's going to get, for lack of better words. It was, we didn't have it fully mapped out at that point. And, even as somebody who's been immersed in BattleTech, I still kind of have a hard time kind of figuring out, and I have access to a lot of material you guys don't. It's still not 100% clear to me what exactly went down and kind of triggered all of this. Whether there were mistakes made on both sides and stuff, it's a gray area, and we spent a lot of time in that jihad. I mean, that was product for years.
Mhm.
And it just wasn't. Part of it is we never had a cohesive story of the jihad from cradle to grave, and that perspective, you just couldn't get your hands around it. And there were, like I said, the conspiracy books were well read from a source book perspective, but they muddied the waters because nobody knew what was accurate in them, if anything. No, it makes it rough. It makes it really rough.
One of the things I liked about the Jihad conspiracy books and plus the Jihad books like themselves is that it was actually told in a perspective of a news report or articles and stuff like that. And I thought that was actually really, really nice that that I don't know if you had any hand in that, but really, really good reading wise.
No, during most of the jihad era, I wasn't writing BattleTech. There's a lot of history there that I'm not allowed to go into, but there's a reason there wasn't a lot of fiction coming out from the established authors during that period. I'm pleased to say I actually had a small role, if not a larger role, in resolving it so we can get fiction out again. Blog post, but I've got, but it's, how we ended up back to where we could do fiction again was kind of it was a difficult journey, but during that period, I wasn't writing for BattleTech. And it wasn't for lack of not wanting to write for BattleTech. There was just some payment issues and things and stuff that had to be worked out, and it impacted all the authors. So it was important that when we solved it for everybody, and we did. So.
I mean, yeah, that's the issue with somewhat with the jihad era. They really wanted to do some crazy stuff, and so to really make that work, they say, and then things go on, but who knows what's really going on? Agents doing stuff, leading misinformation, and it's a lot of very crazy stuff going on where you don't get the definitive answers. There's a lot of question marks everywhere, and that's somewhat what I felt a bit with the Dark Age, with at least the Fortress Republic, with the War. It's a big super technology that doesn't get an answer. And at least going into the next era, are we going to have any more of these kind of big question mark plot elements going on?
No, John actually, John made a comment to me off the cuff. John Helfers, and he'll probably scream because I said it, but he's like, we're not going to introduce stuff that we don't know what the ending is.
Very good.
You know,
Yeah.
and he's the editor. I respect it. He's dead on. I mean, he got it right in that comment. And
So no Death Stars, hopefully.
no, I think what you're going to get, honestly, is a return to the BattleTech that everybody's always wanted. It's just more of a clean slate, I think, in some respects. Dark Ages stuff is so hard. If you want to look up the history of Malvina Hazen, it's buried in 6 different novels. She's in some cases a secondary character. That's rough. People want to read about these people, and to do that, you can't tell them go out and read these books and figure it out for yourself. So we're going to have to get things on an even keel, and we're working towards that. Brent Evans has done a remarkable job. You guys have seen it. We've got miniatures again. We got a Kickstarter coming.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Back, and it's not back where it was like, okay, it's on the shelf and then it might be on the shelf a year from now. No, it's out there and it's constant.
Speaking of the Kickstarter, Blaine, any thoughts on that you want to get out?
Oh, my first reaction was I called Brent and said, I get a free copy, right?
Perfect.
How's that? I was excited about it. The fans have been wanting the new mechs. Brent sent me about 2 weeks before all of this. He sent me the artwork for the new mechs and stuff. So I saw what the sculpts were going to look like, and I was geeked. I mean, because I paint the miniatures up too, guys. I fight this stuff out. I play with my grandson. So I'm excited about seeing new mechs. Kickstarter, I get it. It's a great way to raise the money to ensure you're going to have production. So I think that's good. I think they're on the right track. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, one other question. What can you tell us about the Trippets affair?
I don't have a lot of memory of that. I do have one that I'm going to do at one point that never made it into Comstar. But I always wanted to do the one story of the ship that didn't make it. So what if you had a jump problem and couldn't make it to the rendezvous with the Starling Defense Force to leave New Samarkand with drop ships full of men, equipment, personnel, etc., and you showed up a week late? That I wanted to get into. The Trippets, as I recall, wasn't it a vessel that we had that was jumping around and kind of out in the periphery and nobody knew where they were?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, stuff in just because it's good story.
Yeah, like the Vanderbird White Wings.
There's a whole bunch of weird, goofy stuff out there in the periphery still. Our old line used to be, I'll never forget, Jordan told me once, he said, the periphery is where technology goes to die. Do miss the old days of pirates out there, though.
Well, as we are closing in on the end of the BattleTech section, Blaine, do you have any closing thoughts on the ages that shall not be named and what comes beyond?
All I can tell you is this is the coolest time ever to be involved in BattleTech. I appreciate everybody's patience as we get through all the necessary, reviews, etc. But the stuff that's coming, I think, is going to leave you guys with your jaws hanging wide open. The coolest times we've ever had coming up. I'm excited about it, and I hope you guys are too.
Oh yeah.
The stuff, especially some of the stuff Brent's come up with the Federated Suns and stuff, it's just in many respects it reminds me of some of the stuff from 3025 era. we're capturing some of that spirit back. And I always liked that era. Yeah, we've got the high tech now, but we're going to have some aspects of that I think are really going to open up some people's campaigns and really change some stuff. So really excited. I hope you guys are too.
One last question for me. I'm a lore freak. I like this kind of stuff. Is the Explorer Corps, and I'm just curious. What was the inspiration for actually creating that? Was it just to go find the clans type thing, or just explore the periphery and find lost planets?
Me, it was always one thing and one thing only: go find what happened to Kerensky.
Okay.
The Kerensky factor was, the Star League Defense Forces were a potential boogeyman for Comstar and a potential boogeyman for every one of the House Lords. No one had any idea where they were or what they were doing, and they left with a considerable amount of equipment and technology. And the thought was obviously that they may not have suffered what the Inner Sphere did in terms of the succession wars. And if that was the case, holy crap, what happens when they show up, or if they do show up? It's a game changer, and it really could have completely derailed everything from Comstar on down. If you think about it, if they had discovered that Kerensky had gone off and they had peacefully refounded the Star League somewhere, for any of the civil war and infighting, but had simply prospered and developed new tech and technologically and sociologically advanced, and then decided at some point, well, okay, well, we're going to come home. And Comstar always relied on one thing: we control all interstellar communications.
Yeah.
We're AT&T with guns, and it works out really good until somebody else says, well, I have interstellar communications too, and I have bigger guns. And I think was paranoid. Paranoid, rightfully so, because the entire factor of the clans was return was a disrupting factor, and it really brought about the end of Comstar in many respects. It's ironic because the Explorer Corps is what ends up triggering the clan invasion.
Yeah.
It's the outbound light. The outbound light shows up, and then boom, you end up with the clans go, oh, they found us, we better go wipe them out. In many respects, it's kind of funny, and like I said, there's a Shakespearean element to that of you've triggered your own doom. I think we're going to have, like I said, it's interesting in a year where you've got Endgame and Game of Thrones and stuff all kind of concluding here. This is an interesting time for BattleTech to be making the change that it is. So it's going to be a lot of stuff. I'm sure the comparisons will be made. Technically, for the record, we had the book written, in December. So
Okay.
we were out before they were in many respects.
And at this point, to close off all of our BattleTech related questions, we've got a quick fire one for you. Blaine,
Sure.
Are you ready to answer some questions with very few words?
Okay.
What's your favorite character in BattleTech? Oh, Trent, the clan. Right. What's your least favorite character?
Disc.
What's your favorite mech?
Oh, that's mean.
I know.
Atlas.
All right, least favorite mech.
Raven. Freaking Ravens.
I've got a follow-up for that later on. What's your favorite faction in BattleTech?
I don't have a favorite faction.
All right, do you have a least favorite faction?
Oslau.
All right, then. And what's your favorite part of BattleTech timeline so far?
Wow. I would say the clan invasion.
What are your thoughts on the new play experience of Mechwarrior Online?
Oh, that's a great question. It's horrible. I jumped in as a new player and I struggled. I mean, we got a testing ground. You can go drive around a mech. These mechs are not configured well. Some of the standard off-the-shelf mechs. They're not optimized. It wasn't until I started, I got invited to fight with the 13th Oriente Hussars, and some guys coached me and gave me some custom configurations and walked me through how to use skills. And stuff that I mean, I was getting blown away, and I was doing like 30 points of damage, and I'm like, I know the BattleTech universe. I know some of the background. If I'm struggling with this, how could somebody who's coming in off the street who knows none of this stuff, how would they react? And I think most of them would play 3 or 4 games and then uninstall.
Yep.
You got to have a group that walks you through that. And I'm fortunate because I fight in a group that is basically tutoring me on some of the nuances of this stuff. And I'm doing better. I'm not great. I'm never going to be great, but I think that they've really got to work on how do you get people into this. And you got to have somebody that's there kind of walking you through it, because it's not easy. And there's a lot of layers and complexity to this stuff that, you really got to work through.
Did you play the, how's it called? The tutorial you get when you start the game for the first time?
Yeah. But I just don't think I just don't feel like it really puts you in, etc. You really almost need a coach to walk you through some of this stuff. And it doesn't take a lot. And once somebody walks you through it, gameplay has improved dramatically by just fighting on a team. And when we fight on Friday nights, I get blasted. I mean, because we're going up against other teams, and some of these guys are just they're machines. They've optimized all of their configurations, etc. But at least you get a little bit better doing that. And if you got somebody explain to you, here's what they're doing, and why they're doing it, and here's how we're going to try to counter it, work through some of that stuff.
You should join us on Friday night, because we just like, let's slap a AC cannon on our thing and go to town. Let's go. And that's all we do when we win games. It's a lot of fun.
I always tell people, if you see me online, send me an invite. I'll go fight. I don't care.
And with that, thank you, Blaine. We do appreciate you being on the First Circuit podcast. You are an icon to BattleTech and all the different novels and everything else you wrote for the lore. Thank you so much for everything you've done for the game system and for my childhood. And thank you for, literally, you led me into a lot of different things, like history and all that kind of stuff. And I do appreciate that.
All right. Well, thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you very much. Tonight we had Biter,
Larg,
Ian,
Bye-bye.
and myself, I gotta think of saying. And thank you very much for everyone for watching the First Circuit podcast number 90.